I want to start this off with the disclaimer that there's going to be a lot of information here, but I'm going to try to focus it on the recent events that the Emperor has been involved in. And the reason that there's so much information and the reason that I have to say this beforehand is because the Emperor is a very divisive character. Half the community thinks he's evil, half the community thinks he's benevolent, and really only he knows his greater intentions or grand plan. Honestly, you can interpret him however you would like. I'm going to try to shoot as straight down the middle as I possibly can on this and just give you the raw information of what we know as a fact. Without further ado, let's just kick this right on off and get into the Emperor. So, who's this Emperor character? What's all the hullabaloo about him? Why do we care? Well, the Emperor on the grand scale of things, on the universal scale of things, is generally considered as the guy who's in control of humanity. He's the head of the ship. He's 15 feet of gilded steel and sex appeal that women love and men fear, alright? He's what I guess you could consider a president or a prime minister, except he's actually got benevolent intentions instead of just purely self-serving ones like what we have today. Now, he's also kind of the best psyker there ever was, which we'll get into that more in a moment, but all you need to know is, as far as the mountain goes, he's at the top of it. I mean, the guy's just unfathomably good at everything. In order to understand where he came from, you need to understand what a psyker is. In the most reductive of terms, a psyker is pretty much just a magician, but they use actual magic. And last I checked, a couple thousand of them all died. Keep in mind, these were also immortal psykers, so, you know, just putting some extra sprinkles on that chocolate donut. They all looked into the future, and they could see that, hey, humanity is in for some rough waters ahead. So we're all going to die simultaneously and then funnel all of our collective essence and power into one singular being. And thus the Emperor was born. Now, it takes a while for the Emperor to become the Emperor, but he basically influences all of humanity. The entire thing, almost all the way through. Like, he was Alexander the Great at one point, and God knows who else. But essentially, he's just this singular, nigh omnipotent being made of an incredible wellspring of power. Eventually, through his escapades of trying to unite humanity, he meets a guy named Alanius. We're going to call him Ollie for short. He meets Ollie, they get along swimmingly. Ollie is also an immortal. He makes Ollie his war master, so Ollie's basically his acting general. And eventually they make their way to this giant evil castle. Not evil as in chaotic, but evil as in, well, just straight up evil. And it was filled with these magical words that are effectively like shouts from Skyrim. Like, you use these words and they tear open reality, or they fuck with the fabric of reality around you. They're stronger than normal sorcery is what I'm getting at. Now, Ollie was like, hey, we need to make sure these things don't exist, point blank, period. We need to get rid of them now. And the Emperor said, well, hold on, maybe we should safeguard these so that we can use them in the future against enemies such as Chaos, which is going to pop its head up soon enough. Ollie was like, absolutely not, hell no, stabs the Emperor with a sacrificial blade, kills the Emperor, and then uses one of those words to absolutely nuke the palace. So, that's pretty much the initial death of the Emperor. After his death, the Emperor worked more or less like a shadow government, pulling the strings and directing humanity where he needed it to go. And that eventually leads us into the dark age of technology. In short, this is the super-industrial revolution. There's space cathedrals being made, there's super robots being built, all sorts of crazy stuff. That's pretty much the long and short of it. During this time, the Emperor would make a deal with the Chaos Gods. Big E would get his powers, and Big E would spread chaos to humanity. He did not follow through on his end of the deal. He just got the powers from the Chaos Gods and started using them to his own ends. This was mostly in hopes to shut the Chaos Gods out fully from humanity. That's what his main goal was. That's what his main creation is for. The Emperor abhors chaos. He was almost solely designed specifically to prevent its existence permeating into humanity. And with these chaos powers that he got, he was also able to begin creating his Primarchs. But that's going to come in a little bit. We got to get to the Age of Strife before we get there. The Age of Strife would cruise in right after the Dark Age of Technology. It effectively went from Industrial Revolution to Great Depression, but like really far and wide Great Depression. Now, during this time, the Emperor would meet a guy named Melkador. Melkador was a super good psyker. Not as good as the Emperor, but still incredibly good, abnormally good. He would become the best friend and advisor to the Emperor. Pretty much the only one the Emperor would consider his equal. Now, those two made the Thunder Warriors to help unify Earth, and in short, the Thunder Warriors are basically pre-Space Marines, which, you know, they die soon, so don't worry about them. Anyway, Earth gets unified, and the Emperor decides, okay, it's time to expand out into the stars. Let me start working on my Space Marine program and start really crafting up these Primarchs that I got the powers to create so that they can help me take over the stars. Alright, pay the fuck attention. Important shit starts happening now. The Great Crusade, pretty much the giant act of the Emperor saying, we gotta clean up the galaxy, we gotta have humanity on top, humanity for the win, fuck everything else. A couple things happen during this bit. First, he meets the Mechanicum. He doesn't just meet the Mechanicum, he starts working together. They're on Mars. They're pretty much super robots. They are where you get all of your mechanical technology. He's not like, oh my god, hell yeah, we're working with robots, but he sees them as a means to an end. Now, during that time where the Emperor was kind of just getting his ducks in a row, the Primarchs would be scattered across the universe via the forces of chaos, because the Chaos Gods got burned on that earlier deal, and they weren't just going to let that slide. Plus, pretty sure they knew that those Primarchs were supposed to be the death of them. So, he starts gathering his kids, and look, gathering the kids went a little bit like this. In order, the first one was Horus. Horus got picked up by the Emperor. He's like, hey, want to go rule the galaxy? Hell yeah, I want to go rule the galaxy. Cool, get in the car, let's go. That went fine enough. Then was Lehman. Lehman was a little more infuriating. It was, you gotta prove you're my dad, dude. How should I know that the 15-foot tall dude is the father of the 12-foot tall dude? Okay, fair enough, whatever, who cares? Drink off, eat off, loses both of those, and then he gets in a fist fight with Lehman, and he beats Lehman in the fist fight. Lehman spitting out his teeth is like, yeah, okay, you're my dad, I'll get in the car. Ferris, once again, pretty simple. This place is boring as hell. Yeah, I'll go get in the car. Fulgrim, once again, pretty simple. Oh my god, you're my dad? Hell yeah, I'll get in the car. This is dope. Next up is Vulcan. Vulcan was, oh my god, hug me, daddy. And then they just hugged it out, went along their way, got in the car. They're on a roll. Dorn picks up Dorn just fine again. Dorn's just, yes, father, I will help you. And then gets in the car, keeps on driving. Next we got Rabute. Rabute, pretty much the same thing as Dorn. He's a little more excited, but not by much. It's just, oh my god, dad, okay, cool, let's go. Not too different. You're noticing a theme here. Then Magnus. Magnus was interesting because Magnus was able to communicate telepathically with the Emperor the whole time. That's not really important. It was just another, hell yeah, dad, let's go kind of moment. Then was Sanguinius. Once again, another hell yeah, dad, get in the car, let's keep on going moment. Then was the Lion. The Lion, more, I mean, there was a tumultuous part. They tried to coup. His people tried to kill the Emperor, but he didn't. It was just his people that were dicks. So I guess that was once again a get in the car, let's go for a ride kind of moment. So far, everything's going fine. Then he gets Perturabo. Perturabo, stone-faced exterior, but still hops in the car, gets ready to go. Then eventually we get to Mortarion. Mortarion doesn't really want to get in the car. He's really whiny about it. No one wants to sit next to him in the car because he fucking smells bad. But eventually they have him sit in the trunk. Then up is Lorgar. Lorgar, the Emperor, showed up and was like, fuck, I don't even want to let you in the car, dude. What is this? why the towers? Why are there towers of me? I thought I was pretty clear about no building towers. Why are these people preaching? Oh, God, you suck. I hate you. You're the worst. Get in the car. Just shut up and get in the car, you bald fuck. And then was the con. Jagged's Eye Con was pretty much just, yeah, sure, whatever. I've done everything there is to do on this planet. I'll go with you because the alternative does not sound great. And then there was Conrad, and the Emperor just immediately ordered all sharp objects get out of the car immediately when he found Conrad, because Conrad at that time was still walking around rocking a skin loincloth. So, Conrad trepidatiously was allowed into the car. And then Angron. Angron, he pretty much handcuffed and shoved in the trunk. Like, Angron was not willing at all. Angron didn't fuck with it whatsoever. Corvus, he talked to and was like, you know what? I'm going to let you keep doing you. You come visit when you're ready, which was weird, but fine, I guess. And then there was Alfarius. We don't really know how Alfarius got there because Alfarius just lied about taking the city bus or whatever. And that was the Primarchs, and how they ended up all on Terra. Or Earth, as you know it. The Suns went out conquering worlds for quite some time until the Ullanor Crusade begun. The Ullanor Crusade would end in the Emperor defeating the largest scale force of orcs in the galaxy to that point. Now, as a result, Horus ended up getting promoted to War Master, meaning he is now pretty much the hand that guides all of the other Primarchs. This would infuriate some, it made others jealous, but it also made Horus feel dejected. This is because Big E went to work on the Webway. The Webway, in short, was a safer form of travel as opposed to warp travel that they were currently using. The reason that they couldn't currently use warp travel, or that they didn't want to keep using warp travel, was because the warp is pretty much where psychers draw all their magic, and it's also the realm where chaos is. So you're pretty liable to get fucked up when using the warp, to a significant degree. And it's best if that's just completely shut out, which is why the Emperor once again began work on the Webway project. Everything would be relatively fine until the Council of Nicaea intervened. The Council of Nicaea was effectively the trial of the century. The Emperor, his advisors, and a handful of Primarchs got together to decide the fate of Psychers in the new Imperium. They determined that, although despite being very helpful, you can't use warp powers anymore, because when you use warp powers, you're not immediately corrupted by chaos, but there's always that chance, and once again, it's almost the explicitly stated purpose of the Emperor's existence, apart from unifying humanity, to prevent chaos from encroaching upon them. Now, although I'm sure he would try to kill the Chaos Gods if he could, you can't. It's not an option. So, instead, his best bet was just shut the door on the warp entirely, because any access to the warp could accidentally turn into access to chaos. So we just gotta shut that door entirely, keep the two universes separate, and make sure they never touch each other. And thus his verdict was no more Psychers, no more warp powers allowed. Not too terribly long after that, Horus would get stabbed by the poop shiv on Davin, turn to chaos. He gets told Big E wants to become a god. He gets told the Chaos Gods are victims somehow. Ends up corrupting half the legions because he's just that damn good. And the Horus heresy begins. I never use the term Horus heresy because, well, despite hearing it a lot, it's kind of vague. This is what I meant every time I said galaxy-spanning civil war or anything like that, or rebellion. That's the Horus heresy. That's what it's collectively referred to as. I just never said that earlier because I didn't want to confuse anybody. Okay, I want you to picture something before this next part. Imagine Terra, or Earth, as Terra itself, and then this giant psychic bubble around it, preventing warp stuff from getting in. Got it? Good. Okay. So, Magnus goes ahead and has a psychic vision of Horus and all the fuck shit he's about to do in the future and decides, I gotta warn Dad immediately. What's the fastest way to do it? I can use my warp powers to project my consciousness all the way over to Earth. Now, naturally, he ends up meeting that bubble we just talked about. So, he makes a deal with a Chaos God to get in and warn his dad. He doesn't know it's a Chaos God at the time, but well, it's still a chaos god. So he ends up just bursting straight through the doors of the Golden Palace throne room. And like demons are spilling in behind him. The Golden Throne, which we'll talk about later, gets absolutely butt fucked. And the Emperor is livid. People die. The Webway project is pretty much ruined. Like, it's all but unsalvageable now because of this. And that led to the burning of Prospero. In short, the Emperor was like, oh my god, what the fuck? Okay, Lehman, Magnus just attacked me for some reason, probably because I banned Psychers. Go get him and bring him back here alive. Horus intercepts Lehman on his way to Magnus and is like, hey, Dad said kill Magnus. And Lehman was like, okay, whatever Dad said, sure. Hightails it to Magnus, burns the entire planet to the ground. It's absolutely worthless now. Ends up breaking Magnus's spine. Magnus swears himself over to Chaos, and Magnus is pretty much enemy of the Emperor from here on out. Because the Golden Throne and the protective barrier around Earth is so fucked up, the Emperor now has to sit on the Golden Throne 24/7 throughout the entire Horus heresy. He has to sit the whole thing out because as soon as he stands up from that chair, that hole in the warp will rip open again and demons will begin pouring into Terra. Because of this, he ends up leaving Rogel Dorn and Melkador in charge of the defense of Terra. Now, Big E even psychically admits, hey, this is a shit show. It's going terribly. I don't know what's going to happen. I've no idea where this ends. Humanity is probably fucked, but we're at least going to get our licks back. He then makes, with Malkador, the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights are pretty much the supreme demon hunting brigade. We'll talk about them someday, just not today. Fast forward to the end of the Siege of Terra, where Horus is losing the battle. Big E is stuck on the chair, and he ends up talking to Magnus, and he's like, hey, you can still come over here, dude. It's going to be absolute bliss if you do. All it would take is you sitting on this chair, and you will have all the wealth of knowledge that you've ever wanted. Magnus flips his shit, is like, no, and then Vulcan ends up beating the shit out of Magnus, so I don't even know why I bothered telling you that. Anyway, Horus starts losing and begins to lower his shields. The Emperor is like, hey, Melkador, sit on the chair for a bit. I'm sorry, it's gonna kill you, but I gotta go kill this guy, because that's just how we do shit around here. Big E ends up showing up on Horus's ship, and all of his forces get scrambled. They're all over the place. Everyone's dying. It's just a shit show of grandiose proportions. And then the Emperor does some completely out-of-pocket shit. The accounts of what happens next are varied, so I'll try to get it as accurately as I can, but pardon me if I miss a thing here or there. Anyway, the Emperor on Horus's ship just decides, fuck it, I'm done, I don't care anymore. He wants to use the Chaos God powers. I'll use the powers they gave me ever so long ago that I still haven't fully tapped into. Then and there, the Emperor just drops the whole compassion bullshit and goes full Chaos God. I'm not kidding. It's called the Dark King, or he would have been called the Dark King. In that moment, he begins to ascend into becoming a Chaos God. That's wild. That's not normal. Fortunately, he's snapped out of it by his cohorts, and the shockwave that it creates, first of all, it vaporizes everything near him, even his own men, and it pretty much clears the entire warp presence, demons, everything on Terra, just smokes the dog shit out of them. And then the Emperor's like, that's fucked up. It's the opposite of what I exist for. I just gotta kill my son the old-fashioned way. There's a million goddamn takes about how the fight between Horus and the Emperor played out, so I'll just tell you how it ends, because we know where that goes. Horus ends up getting pretty much erased from reality. He can't come back. Nothing, nada, zilch, zero. He's dead for good. And Big E is so injured and fucked up, he gets interred upon the Golden Throne. Now let's fast forward to the current day. It's not good. It's actually a pretty big mess. See, humanity now worships the Emperor in his Golden Throne as a god, something the Emperor expressly forbade. Humanity is managed by a bunch of bureaucrats, so pretty much imagine how shitty of a job your senator does and then expand it to a galaxy-wide scale. He is always in pain, just eternal agony, and they have to sacrifice thousands of psychers to him all the time. And he needs to be alive, because if he doesn't, humanity just kind of shits the bed and rips itself to shreds. And, you know, some theories are like he'll come back someday, or he's manifesting a new version of himself in the warp. Honestly, theories don't mean shit. You'll hear something important about him sometime. Until then, just kick your feet up, sit pretty, and wait. And, yeah, that's all, folks. My mouth is dry. I'm going to go drink a bunch of water and probably a couple libations. And you guys have a good night. I appreciate you for sticking with me.